Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show, The Strange Reality. I shouldn't call that tonight with my guest. This person is really real on The Strange Reality, and he's a military guy, and so am I. So I have to appreciate that. And he outranks me, and I got to be careful.
Not at all. Don't worry about that a
But
bit, Dave.
he's a
Not a bit.
he's a
Those
full
days are
board.
gone.
Yeah, he's a full board colonel, and I'm just a sergeant, a platoon sergeant. But well, I was going to get a commission, but I didn't say. But Rick stuck it out, and he did a good job with it. And apparently, he's got a lot of things that he's worked with, and he spent 28 years in the military, and he's been a little bit of everywhere. I'll read off his bio, and get a good taste of what he's been doing. But then we're going to go into his books. He's written his fourth book now, and it'll be released next month. Ralph R. Rick Steinke is a
Perfect.
is a decorated U.S. Army veteran and former Defense Department official who spent over 40 years working in intelligence, national security, and foreign operations across 30 plus countries. Now he's transforming his firsthand experience into award-winning, pulse-pounding fiction in his latest book here, Jake Fortina thriller series, praised as the ripped from today's headlines or the ones they don't want you to see. And we'll talk about his new release, his new book, but also we're going on here more. He has the U.S. Legion Merit, Office of the Secretary of Defense Award for Exceptional Civilian Service. Right on there, Colonel. Yeah,
Somebody's got a sense of humor.
yeah, yeah. But then he's got the French National Order of Merit Commander. So he knows a little bit of French, I guess. Do you have to learn all those languages, Rick?
Yeah, I did, Dave. I speak fluent German and Italian and pretty darn good French. Not bad. It was enough to be professionally adequate. And I'm trying to learn Spanish now. My daughter's married to a Spaniard, married
Oh,
into a Spanish family, so I'm working on that one. So
okay. Well, that's yeah. I'll tell you what, you've almost got Melania beat. She has what, five? You got four languages. Great. Let's get back to the U.S. State Department of Meritorious Service Award in Afghanistan, U.S. Army Ranger Tab and Parachutist Badge. I wanted the parachute, but I didn't have enough time, Colonel. Italian Army Parachute Badge and other awards and badges. He holds a master's degree. Not only is he a brave soldier, he's educated, the master's degree in West European Studies and Diplomacy from Indiana and Norwich universities, respectfully, as well as post graduation certificates in national and international security affairs from Harvard and Stanford universities. His passions include faith, family, fly fishing, and travel. I love all that myself. And he's retired now and he's doing a lot of that, but he's writing, and that's a lot of work in itself. He knows that. Steinke, born in El Paso, Texas, grew up in numerous places, including Oklahoma, Kansas, Virginia, Indiana, California, and Oregon. He later spent time overseas in Afghanistan, Albania, Germany, Italy, and France. He resides in Heber Valley, Utah. You can contact him on LinkedIn at Ralph at Rick. And so we'll go into the context, and I'll put that in narrative. Uh, Ralph, Rick Steinke, Colonel, tell us a little bit of what you're doing now, and what's your near future plus this book.
well, thank you. You know, first of all, my most important thing is my faith, of course, in God. But I also want to say my family, and so I'm probably one of the first times in my life I'm able to really spend a lot of time with family things. So I do try to see my family whenever I can. Um, my daughter's married to a Spaniard, so we get over to Europe sometimes. We get to Spain and be able to see them as well. Uh, I do love to fly fish. Been to some wonderful places like Alaska and Chile. To be able to do that, been extraordinary, and it's pretty darn good fishing right here in Utah as well. So that's been a lot of fun. And then I spent a fair amount of time when I can working between everything else and having fun and writing, Dave. And I started on this path about, oh gosh, 6 years ago with a memoir, and that's was called Next Mission, about my time as the U.S. Defense Attaché in France, and that's out of print, but it'll be out. It'll be back out in the next few months, probably in early 26. But then I started working on this Jake Fortina novel series, and I've got 3 books out there now, and I'm going to have a 4th coming out on August 26th called Vital Mission.
Yeah, let me read what you sent me, what your publicist sent me to sum it up in a synopsis. His newest release, Vital Mission, August 2025, dives into WMD threats, Russian covert ops. They're highly interested in that now, and international intrigue with terrifying accuracy, whether discussing black ops teams in Eastern Europe or the psychological chess game of global diplomacy. Steinke offers rare insight into the real world stakes behind today's headlines. So we'll get a sneak peek at what goes on behind the curtain, maybe with Rick here. Uh, Rick, could you tell us a little bit why you wrote this book and why was it important for you to get this book out and
So,
your other books too?
yeah. So a lot of what you mentioned there, Dave, was actually throughout all my books. That all those topics have been in some way covered in my books, but this 4th book is a little bit different. It's called Vital Mission, as I mentioned, a Jake Fortina series love story. I'm not going to tell you what the love part of it is, and I hope readers would give it a shot. But in this particular case, Jake is, he's called upon by a dear friend who is a Ukrainian to go into Russia to rescue a couple of boys who are closely related to the Ukrainian. And I don't know if readers know this. A lot of people don't. It's quite interesting to me that not much more has been written about this or said about it. Some things you just don't get sometimes. But, since the start of the war, when the Russians first attacked Mariupol on the 24th of February, 2022, over 20,000 kids have been taken off the streets and out of the bombed buildings, and from that were left by parents that were killed, or you name it, throughout Ukraine, and taken back to Russia, and given off to families, and in some cases, put through some military schools, as I understand it. And I mentioned some of that in my book as well. But they've been separated from their family members, and there's been precious little written about it. I don't think certainly enough, because it shocks me that this kind of a thing can happen in the 21st century. But it has. It's been documented. They've even, the Russians themselves have said some things to fully admit it. So this mission that Jake's on is a different one than some of the ones he's had to deal with before, where he's actually having to deal with a direct threat. For example, an emerging Iranian biological threat in one of the books, to a Russian oligarch who, wants to go back to the Kremlin and be more powerful and more terrifying than the current occupant in the second book, and so forth. And so, but this one is a little bit different. But as I try to do in all my books, is to keep them as authentic as possible, first of all, and second of all, to make them sort of in, kind of like a torn from the headlines, although in this case there isn't a lot of headline out there. That's kind of why I brought it. But,
Rick, there was a story. They've been talking about it. They keep talking about 20,000 kids that were taken to Russia, and Lewinsky wants those kids back, and they're trying to talk a deal. Of course, Trump is in there trying to talk a deal and get things going. And I guess their parents were killed in the war, and they were orphans, and these Russian soldiers, I guess, picked up on them. But also, we have that at our southern border. What, 300,000 kids have been missing from the southern?
Yeah, I don't know about those numbers. I don't know what those numbers exactly were. So I wouldn't even want to venture anything on that. But yeah, that's also, I know there have been kids separated there too. I understand that.
So how's this all going to work out? Are they going to give in on these negotiations and let the kids come back to the Ukraine?
I would dare not make any kind of prediction on how that's going to end up at the end of the day. I don't know. I mean, you have a range of scenarios where, in the current talks, uh, there could be the return of the kids could be contingent for making deals.
Hmm.
That's a possibility, of course. It could be that, the Ukrainians might think that that's a bridge too far for now and think maybe, hey, let's at least save our country in one piece. And how that's going to work out, Dave, between the Donetsk region and the region of Crimea, those are the two principal ones that are being occupied by the Russians. Whether they're going to get both of those back, whether they don't get any of them back, whether they get one of them back, they do, it's probably going to be Donetsk. We don't know.
Well,
Uh,
Rick, I know that you come from a very serious and a very true, background in what you've been doing in intelligence with the military. But us people on the street, and of course we don't know anything. What we're told is from the mainstream media. They
course,
tell us the total truth. They're not being honest with us about what's going on. President Trump, and I want to see if I can get a clarification on this since we're talking about the kids in Ukraine. And then I want to get into this to your hero here. I guess that's what he
Jake Fortina.
yeah, Jake Fortina. Uh, Trump talks about, and this is I've been in war and I've seen, and when I hear this, it makes my stomach turn a little bit. Trump said there's 7,000 people getting killed every week in this Russia-Ukraine war. Are those numbers true, Rick?
I think those numbers have varied. I would tell you they sound. Are you talking about Russians or are you talking about Ukrainians?
Well, actually, I heard that the Russians lost 1.1 million soldiers.
Those that would not stun me that they would have that many casualties. That they had, they may be right, Dave. I don't know. I don't. They may include casualties, if you will, wounded as well, because sometimes those things are conflated. If you know in those big numbers, I would say this, and I've been following this along for 3 years. I don't have access to current intelligence, that's for sure. I try to read what I can in open source. That the losses on the Russian side, I don't know. I would venture to guess. I don't know. It's a guess. 6-1, 7-1 against the Ukrainians at least. I think that the Ukrainians have fought extremely valiantly.
Right. They're good.
I think part of those numbers, this is just me and my experience talking and my conjecture, is the Ukrainians have been trained by the West. Okay, you're a former Army non-commissioned officer. You had a lot of latitude as a non-commissioned officer, as do militaries like the Brits, the French that I've seen, that I've served with. Their sergeants have a lot of latitude. The Ukrainians are very, I'm sorry, the Russians are a very officer-centric military.
I heard that.
And so at the front line, they lose a lot of the initiative. That's an old Soviet holdover that is still there as far as I know it. I think we trained Ukrainians, by the way, we meaning the West, far more sort of open-eyed way of looking at combat operations, meaning that when we train, we're not afraid to call out people to say, hey, you did this wrong. Even the colonel, if you're, when I went to the National Training Center, it doesn't matter who you were. If you were the private, man in a machine gun, or if you're the battalion commander who's in charge of an artillery battalion, you had to conduct an after-action review after every single battle, find out what you could do better, find out how you could improve. And sometimes it was uncomfortable for senior officers because they realized they made some mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, I not served in the Russian military, but I can guarantee you that it ain't that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I think one of the reasons, besides their sheer bravery, their valor, the Ukrainians that have committed to defending their country, that's one of the reasons why they're. If you go back to when the Russians invaded on the 24th and got probably with that, especially that major convoy coming directly down north, within 20 miles at least of Moscow, and got stopped. And that's just because a lot of, I don't care what rank you were, if you could fire a line anti-tank weapon, or the javelin, you were going to do it. And they got the job done and they drove them back out. And so the pure cohesion in their forces, ability to stick together, watch your buddy, I think is far better. And I think, and pity a lot of Russian soldiers. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But
You brought up the word latitude, and you talk about the Russian officers making a lot of mistakes because they don't know really what's going on about a mile out where all the action's at. I
100%.
I told you a story before we got on air about me as a sergeant having the control of calling in artillery, and in Russia, the colonel that was on the other end of that Lima landline, they would have said, "I want to send my adjutant down there to take a look at things before we do this," but he said, "Go ahead, let's do this," and so when you said latitude, I said, "Wow, there it is."
And it's latitude and it's also trust.
Yeah.
It's trust, Dave, because you know when you when a senior officer gets fired, what is the thing you hear every single time? That the chain of command has lost trust and confidence in that person's ability to lead.
Mm-hmm.
Trust in the American, I can certainly say in the American experience, is vital. You don't have that. You don't have the glue that sticks units together at the end of the day. So that's very, very important. And it's one of those values that we really adhere to in the United States Armed Forces, I'll tell you at the end of the day.
So your main character, Jake Fortina,
Yeah,
he epitomizes what we're just talking about: trust,
that's correct.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah, what you're gonna, here's my guy, Jake
tell us
Fortina.
about it.
He's an ordinary officer. Okay. He's not the next U.S. Grant. He's not the next George Patton. He's not the next George C. Marshall. He's an ordinary officer who's trying to do the best he can, and at some point finds himself facing extraordinary national security threats, and he rises to the occasion every time. Now, what I will also say is he's ordinary in that he's got to deal with personal tragedies, personal loss, family loss, soldier loss as a junior officer,
Mm.
And just how devastating those things can be at the end of the day. He's got to deal with failures. He's got to deal with family problems. He's not a character, Dave. And God bless him. And they're out there, and we all see them, and a lot of people love it. And listen. There are some big time Hollywood bucks made on these kinds of characters that can walk in a room and kill 25 guys in 32 seconds.
Right.
Right? We've seen them, and and I know that's pretty much BS.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen.
No,
it just didn't. But we lap it up because hey, the good guy wins every single time and kills everybody. Jake's not that way. So one of the things I really strive for is authenticity. Try to get in Jake's head. Try to and his enemies' heads too, by the way, at the end of the day, and see what he's dealing with, and see what he can do on his own initiative, what he can do in terms of relationships professionally he may have established and so forth. He's not a guy, that's going to go around, shooting everybody, like I said, and he's going to do it another way and get it done. But he'll get it done. That's my Jake Fortina character at the end of the day. And he's got a few things going for him. He's speaks a few languages. I think in Jake's case, I've got him speaking French and Italian and some Iranian even that he learned once upon a time for a particular mission. And so he's not a superhero, but he is a hero.
My last book in sci-fi, you sound like you are actually playing the part of Jake with your own character and your own, your own military, experience, and also your moral code that you're applying to this Jake is coming through you. And I know this is what happened to me in a couple of my books that I found myself writing. This this is me, but I try to pull back and say, no, it's not me. It's my character, you know. And,
Right, right, sure.
but you have to write from your experiences, and that's what you're doing.
They
Yeah.
say what you write best is what you write from your personal experiences, and you're absolutely spot on about Jake's moral code. He's first and foremost most a faithful guy. He doesn't wear his faith on his sleeve, but he does hold that faith to be true. He tries to live it every day. And his North Star is the same thing that was our North Star.
Mm.
Yours in Vietnam, mine in the years thereafter. And that is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Right.
That is it. You know, on a personal level, his faith and his integrity hold him together when the stuff hits the fan, if you will, at the end of the day. And then his North Star is always, you know, I've got to do what's right for our Constitution, not whoever's sitting in the White House or whatever. Yeah, he's commander in chief. I don't care who it is, what year it is, what decade it was, in your time. You know, if it was Richard Nixon or whoever it was, it's the U.S. Constitution. So
And
that's his code. You're right on the money.
right, and the Army always drafts or takes young men 18 on up. And I also saw why that is. Because myself, I volunteered for several missions in Vietnam, and the old man, the captain, wouldn't let me go. He said, we needed you here. But see, I was gung ho. I loved my country, and I don't like what's been going on lately with the country, but I loved my country. I still do.
Of
And
course you do. Same here,
that's,
brother.
you know,
100%. No
yeah.
matter what's going on. Yeah, absolutely.
And if they asked me to serve again, I would, even at my age.
I'm with you.
But I don't know if I can.
I'm with you.
I'm not know if I can do much running around
We
now.
could saddle up together. No,
Yeah,
yeah. Listen, yeah, my mind is there, but my body isn't so
yeah.
much anymore either.
I
I
know
hear
there's
you.
I know there's a lot of veterans out there hear us talk, and I'm gonna push this for the veterans to listen. And there's a lot of guys that I know that's had PTSD, that have been wounded, and it's a sad thing. And I think we should take care of them first.
100%.
And I think we kind of, in the past few years, we kind of left them out, and you know, this is not good. But let's get back to this Jake Fortina. What what does he do? Is he a fighting man? Is he out there in the front, Rick?
No, you know, he does experience well in that to that question, if you're talking about in the military context, yeah, I mean in the first book he does lead a special forces A team, and he gets in a really tough spot in Afghanistan. And I think I do a fairly good job of, you know, describing that whole situation where his team's really got its back against the wall against a much greater uh, Taliban-led force. So that is his crucible of combat, if you will. And then he also serves with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, which is currently in Vicenza, Italy. He does that as a junior officer. Also goes to Afghanistan for that operation. And by the way, the 173rd has been there. I know one of the former brigade commanders there, a guy named Kevin Owens, a great guy. So yeah, he's gonna go do what he has to do. But then at one point, and this is what I really want to make a little bit clear so people understand, the U.S. Army's got a program called the U.S. Army Foreign Area Officer Program, and after a Army officer serves through the rank of captain, let's say, and is successful, has to be very successful as a commander, meaning at the O3 level, he can apply to be a foreign area officer. And if he's got some language aptitude, this is another thing you got to have probably, to get a master's degree, to learn a foreign language, and then to be assigned to a U.S. Combatant command, you know, like CENTCOM or UCOM or one of those areas, PACOM, or to a U.S. embassy, or to work with foreign militaries abroad. And the Army does this program better than any service, I think. I came from that, you know, pedigree, if you will. And but the other services are getting on board with it as well. So it's a new program, well, fairly new. I say new. I mean, for the Army, it's been around for about 40 years, but for some of the other services, maybe more like 25 or so. But where we really want to work closely with our allies. You can imagine the NATO context with, I guess the number is like 30 countries now. You have to be able to work together. If you think we have command and control problems across branches in a military service, think about what it would be nationally. And so how do you bridge those gaps in culture and so forth and try to achieve a common war-fighting perspective? And so that's what foreign area officers do as well. And that's what Jake did. And that's where Jake gets launched. His first assignment is to the U.S. Embassy in Paris as a major.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's there, and this is in the first book, he gets called upon by the local FBI and the French intelligence services as well, and diplomats to help quell a national security threat emerging in France from Iran. Basically, that's that story.
Yeah,
That's
in your bio, and you talk about being a parachutist, and
yeah.
I tried to get into parachuting school at Fort Benning. I didn't have enough time. They said you only got 6 months. We can't let you do it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I wanted to jump, and I envy you jumping in three different, I guess, not companies, but actually, you were in France. You had a, let's see,
I did an Italian training.
Italian, and
I earned the Italian wings as well as the U.S. wings, and
yeah, the
super
U.S.
hot
Army.
July summer at Fort Beginning, if you will.
Yeah,
But
so,
yeah,
yeah. So you can write a book about this Jake character because you have somewhat of that background. You sound like you're a little gung ho from my military experiences. Because signing up for parachute school and you didn't really have to.
well, I'll tell you, you know, yeah, you could, I guess you could say that. Uh, I really did a lot of this stuff so I could be the best leader, the
Mhm.
best leader I could be for my soldiers. And yeah, jump school. Okay, that's if you're going to go to an airborne unit or you're going to go special ops or whatever, that's a big deal.
Was this Fort
But
Benning?
what's
Fort
that?
Fort
Fort
Benning.
Benning, yeah, same place you were talking,
Yeah.
Fort Beginning. Yeah, you better believe hot and blazing,
I
humid as
I
blazes.
wanted to do it, but I watched it from the street. You can see them working from the
Oh
street.
yeah, yeah. You can see those big, what were they, 200-foot towers out there? I
Yeah,
think something
and
like
they was
that. Yeah,
dropping them. Yeah, and
yeah. And
so.
then Ranger School, but Ranger School was the real training crucible
Mhm.
that I did for whatever it was, 2 months. Yeah, that pretty tough, quite demanding, dead of winter to learn how to lead small units, squad, platoon, company level, um, and just put yourself through some really really challenging stuff as close as you can you can be to the real thing. And so that's kind of why I went down those, did volunteered for some of that training, if you will.
Colonel Rick, let me ask you this question. I'm going to get in your talking points because I think I see some strong.
Well, let me just tell you, I hope you got the right ones because they sent out some exaggerated ones from the PR people initially.
Yeah.
Quite,
Okay. Yeah,
so
I have to be careful when I work with the PR. They're nice people. I mean,
yeah, no, they're great. They're great. But
I'll-
we got them to ratchet it back a little bit because they were like, and again, this is authenticity. I don't want them saying
yeah.
all kinds of stuff about me, but that was not accurate. And so I don't know which set you got, but
Okay.
we'll see.
Let me.
We'll go with what you got, Dave.
I think I don't think this first one's going to be wrong or anything. It's going to be. I want to ask me a question before I read off this
Yeah,
talking point. Do you think the military and our government can be more forthright to the civilians, Rick? Could they be more and
I,
let us
I
know?
I think it depends on what you're talking about, Dave. And when you say forthright, are you talking about because there are some things we just cannot allow in the public domain. You know that there's some classified things that are in we don't want to allow our enemies to know about. Let's be brutally honest about that. So it really depends on what we're discussing. I think by and large, the military is as um, open as it can be. There are things we can't talk about, and there are constraints with which
Right.
commanders have got to stay. There's the left and right limit, And the thing you never want to do as a commander is get out in front of the headlights of your civilian authorities, right?
Mhm.
At the end of the day, we serve from a chain of command perspective the civilian political leadership in our country, with the president as the commander in chief at the end of the day, and then the Secretary of Defense down to him, and everybody else on down below that. And so, I don't care if you're a 4-star, you ambassadors, for example, they weigh heavily, and I don't know a 4-star that would cross an ambassador, to be honest, because we understand that the ambassador in a country speaks directly for the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very, how do I say this?
Respectful,
cognizant of that mandatory relationship in the American context.
Okay, let's talk about this. What thriller writers usually get wrong about war, espionage, and intelligence?
Well, I think I described one of them there where, in terms of what they're able to do, and it's become genre now almost, with just being able to be Superman every time you turn a corner, because we know that ain't the case. You're going to get hurt. You're going to lose people. You're going to be in dire straits. You got to get yourself out of. It ain't like it's portrayed. Yeah. So, yeah, I think there are those kinds of exaggerations that we have to work out. I think you and I discussed this before. You mentioned it yourself when you did your writing. I think if people have some experience in the realm, they don't have to be Audie Murphy, but they have to have some experience in the realm, whatever that might be, to be able to speak right authentically. I think that's probably the toughest things. I mean, toughest thing. If you think back before Platoon came out, military stories were just, you and I would probably watch stuff and we'd say that would never happen. That never happened.
The
That
drama,
would never happen.
yeah, the drama that Hollywood stirs up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Hollywood portion of the story, which stories have them. They have to have the plot. They got to have all that stuff. But until Platoon came out in 1986, I think it was, people didn't get any of that. When that movie came out, I remember, wow, now this is true infantry in the muck, in the constant danger, in absolute survival mode, where tragedies are going to happen every 3 seconds, and you gotta press on. You've been there. I haven't, but you've been there.
Yeah, I had to do some things there that in Vietnam I didn't like doing. While I was there as a sergeant, I had about 19 Article 15s written against some guys, and I've had 2 court martials, and won both of them because they both said they were guilty of disobeying, and they fell asleep on duty. They threatened me. They threatened to kill you. And my captain, the old man, told me, "Well, get your Jeep driver and an M60 on the back and aim it towards that bunker when you go by and check on them." And says, I couldn't believe a captain say that. He said, "Go ahead and waste them." So it was a little bit the way, but not that much drama. But it was more legal. It was like an Article 15, which is a misdemeanor fine. And
Yeah, it's a Uniform Code of Military Justice punishment. Yes.
yeah, it was a
Yeah.
little bit like that, but it wasn't all the Hollywood drama. It
Right.
wasn't.
No, it's not. Not. No.
It's
But it's not like it's not as certainly not as easy, if you will, as things are very often portrayed. And a lot of guys, a lot of Hollywood actors that are put through, like I know that Dale Dye, who was a Marine and was in Lebanon when Lebanon got hit really bad, and we lost a bunch of soldiers and Marines there. I think
yeah,
that was circa 1983.
280, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around that time frame. He went from being a Marine captain to he took off to Hollywood and brought some real. In fact, he brought a lot of realism to Platoon, quite frankly. Yeah, he was one that just really insisted that we try to get it right, and that it's ugly and it's painful, and yeah.
Hamburger Hill was one of them that I thought was more authentic than most of them. It sounded real. It looked real. Whoever did that put it together pretty well. Even the bullets winding by, and some of them sound like bumblebees because I've heard that quite a bit. But
I remember that one. Yep.
yeah, but yeah, that's a pretty good movie. But it kind of in the first 15 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, when they landed on the beach. I tell you what, Rick, I'm talking to my people out here. When I was, with my wife, I actually had to get up and go walking around in the lobby because it just hurt me that bad because it was so realistic, and these guys being hit and they're vomiting and they're sick. It just got to me. That first 15 minutes is probably the worst war movie I've ever seen. Uh,
It
be-
was totally visceral. I agree with you 100%.
Mhm. But
And that's something Spielberg wanted to do, and he did it masterfully.
yeah,
Uh,
he had
yeah, it really showed. You talk numbers. I think I don't know. I know it was more than 1,000 we lost on the
yeah,
beaches
12,
that first 24 hours,
10 to 12,000,
and
three beaches, 10 to 12,000, I think. I'm not sure.
yeah, yeah, and uh, but those are numbers, right? You don't see, and The Longest Day was a good movie. That was the old black and white one from the early
Yeah.
'60s. That was great entertainment from them and very informative. But again, didn't show any of the true horrors
Mhm.
of that kind of combat. And hats off to Spielberg for letting folks know that when you send our young men and women in harm's way, this can be the result. So
Yeah.
just think twice.
Yeah. Uh, we've been having, I guess, this thing about espionage going on where it's Russia, 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 and all this other stuff, and the military intelligence, I guess, trying to figure all that out, and I guess they did, but they don't put it out there publicly. I guess they can't stand out above the DOJ and the president and all of them. Even if they find that out that Russia probably wasn't true, the military can't come forward. Is that part of the intelligence and espionage, uh, Colonel Rick, that you might be talking about?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. See, there's a thing called sources and methods. Everybody could read that in pretty much any spy novel
Right.
that have to be protected. And the reason that those have to be protected is because people can be exposed. People that we've recruited can be exposed. Our people can be exposed. Just giving the enemy a couple of pieces of fabric to the point where they can start, and that which for them might be the missing links of how they're trying to assess a given situation, can kill our own American people and that of our allies. And so that's a real tough one. It's always hard for countries to make the determination of whether they did it or not. I think the Israelis, for example, with the Mossad for years, and I'm sure our own agencies are the same way, uh, were very selective in terms of who they let know what they did.
Hmm.
In some cases, they don't want any credit. They don't want anybody to know. Because if you're the bad guy and you're sleeping with one eye open and you don't know who actually is pulling this off, that's already to your advantage as someone who's in the business, if you will. So, and in other cases where, like recently when the Iranian nuclear plants were bombed, I mean, hey, probably that case, they go, look, the whole planet's going to know who did this at the end of the day. So, and by the way, we want to let them know that we can do this again.
Yeah, and that was a
We own
great.
the airspace, and we can do this again. So you always have to keep your primary operational objectives and your overall strategy in mind in terms of what can be released and what absolutely should not be released, and when, or if and when it should ever be released, kind of thing.
It brings me to this latest incident that the military tries to stay away from civilian operations, and the idea that the president can use active duty forces to control riots and things of this nature. Uh, that back in 1968, Colonel, I was trained for riot control while I was waiting for my top secret after I finished my training. They had us in a line. They lined us up. We had about 5 or 6 buses. We were about ready to head to St. Louis. They give us our M14s and they give us one magazine of ammo. And then they actually give us our bayonets with a sheath on them. And they told us, they said, if your line captain tells you to, to draw your bayonets down, then you're supposed to draw your bayonets down. And if he tells you to fire, you're supposed to fire. That was in 1968. These were riots in St. Louis that the riots were going to get out of hand. They thought this is over the killing of the great Martin Luther King, in which I loved that man. I loved what he was
I'm
doing.
with you, brother.
But that there was riots over that, and we were supposed to go to St. Louis, but apparently the police grabbed a hold of it and got control of the riots, and so they called us back. And I said, "Good." I said I couldn't imagine using force on our own people. I couldn't, but
Well,
we were going to do it, and that's a true story, Colonel. I hope
well,
that.
I totally. You don't have to tell. You don't have to make that added. I'm sure it was 100%. You're spot on.
And with
And it's also one of the reasons why. Well, the biggest tragedy out of that era in terms of what you just described in terms of military troops being put in the position of basically law enforcement, which is, by the way, illegal. Posse Comitatus Act. And I'm not an expert on it, but I can tell you that I know that it takes a significant aberration and in extreme case to have to ever even think about doing that. But that the Kent State shooting was something that
yes,
traumatized our whole country when
it did me.
when Army troops, I don't remember if they were National Guard, if they were
They
active,
were
doesn't really matter.
yeah, they were
Uh,
national guard. Yeah.
yeah, killed the four college students in the riot. It was a tragedy. It's an American tragedy.
But
And
But our oath, Colonel, our oath when we first take our oath, it's to protect our country from the enemy enemy that's far away and the enemy that's here in the U.S. That we're
yep,
supposed to protect, our citizens and our country.
support and defend the Constitution
Yes.
against the United States of all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Bingo, got it. Yes, you got it down. I was just trying to
You're right.
elaborate on it, but you got it right. You got it.
That's the heart of the oath, 100%.
So what do we do with that oath, Colonel Rick? When
Well,
you get it?
yeah, we're getting into politics, and I don't want to go down this rabbit
Okay,
hole, to
all
be
right,
honest.
okay.
Um, yeah, I'll just tell you quickly that you know if a governor is an extremist and something really, really terrible, where it's obvious that things are going to go in a really bad way and a hell in a handbasket, then a governor can request it and a president can approve it. But I don't believe that's what happened in this case. I think this is a top-down move. And again, I don't want to go into politics, but yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Okay, that's where we talked about the cutting the line because and I understand the
Yeah,
behind WMD threats and what he's seen up close. You're talking about Jake, right? That what he
right,
said.
Jake, yeah.
Rick, tell us about that.
So again, the first book basically addresses, and I'll just lay it out for you. It's a threat from the Iranians. The opening chapter is in U.S. military cemetery in Paris. There is one from World War One. And when I was visiting there, this is where I got the idea, with a wonderful man, our former Army Chief of Staff called Ray Odierno. Uh, he was not yet the chief. He was a 3-star. He came to Paris on official business, and I think he headed to go to Africa or something next. He was super, super busy. Official business with the French Armed Forces. and he, he had very little free time. And I asked him, what do you want? Because I was a defense attaché. I was the guy that was around with him. And he goes, I want to visit the U.S. Embassy, U.S. Cemetery in Surin. And to my shock, when I went to Surin, it was a World War I cemetery. The vast majority of soldiers that were interned there died of the Spanish flu at the end of World War I.
Yeah.
And that's where the thing got in my mind. And basically what happened is I wrote a story about, imagine the Iranians trying to develop a virus worse than COVID flu, 10 times worse than COVID flu, and worse, way worse than the Spanish flu, which killed more people than any epidemic we've ever had on the planet, at least in the last millennia that I know of. It's over 50 million people, right? It was terrible. And they want to deploy that virus against the United States, Israel, and Jews around the world. So that's that story. And while I was there in Paris, we also had some stuff actually happen in one of the subways. I don't want to go into any detail, where some stuff was released, and so stuff is out there. Let's just put it that way. That those kinds of threats are out there. There's that book. The second book is basically involves the threat of a Russian oligarch who is living in Italy and who wants to return to the Kremlin and be stronger, more decisive than the guy that's there now. Okay. And when the Soviet Union fell apart, Dave, in the early 1990s, accountability for nuclear weapons, especially the smaller suitcase nukes, let's call them that, was lost. I think Medvedev or somebody, or before him actually, name started with an L, but I can't remember. That was a senior government official, acknowledged that about 100 they lost accountability for. So this story basically is a what if story if this Russian oligarch is able to get his hands on one of these and set one of these off against a U.S. naval base in Italy.
Yeah. Do you think some of those weapons went to Ukraine and they hit them in Ukraine?
I mean, that's possible. But to your point about Ukraine, one of the things that people forget, Ukraine at one point had more than 20,000 nuclear weapons. And I think at one point they were the third largest country with nukes on the planet, right? Mm-hmm. And we told the Ukrainians, and the Brits told the Ukrainians, and the Russians told the Ukrainians that if you give up your nukes, this was in something called the Budapest Memorandum, signed in 1994. Look it up. Budapest Memorandum. You give up your nukes, we will vouch for your security. We told Ukraine this. And of course, we know what Russia did in 2014 and again in 2022. So, yeah. Could there be some of that nature still in Ukraine? Maybe. But I think it's probably, it's one of those things that's way out there. Could there be some in Russia? Heck yeah. Entirely possible.
When these drones, I don't know, I know you don't want to go into that, but these drones in New York and New Jersey that were occurring back in December and January, they said that a lot of these drones were looking for a nuclear weapon that was stolen off of a ship. That's what one of the opinions or theories were at that time, Rick. I don't know how true that is. I don't know if you even want to answer that.
I don't know. That was a weird phenomenon. It's settled down, obviously. I don't know. I wouldn't want to speculate.
Now we got into, you're starting to get into current events in Ukraine, Iran, and Israel could actually unfold. What do you think is going to happen to these countries as far as peace is concerned, or is there going to keep being fighting going on, Rick?
Well, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but let me just see if I can maybe address a couple of these. Definitely don't have a crystal ball. But in Iran, I think as a result of recent U.S. and Israeli actions, Hamas, certainly as far as Israel is concerned, has been severely depleted and is in super bad shape. It would take a lot to reconstitute. They can reconstitute over time, but I'm always afraid to say they've been completely defeated, because you can't defeat. Well, you don't know. Let me put it this way: that you defeated somebody until their ideology has been defeated.
You're right.
You have to snuff out the ideology. If you don't snuff out the ideology, the chance for it rearing its ugly head again is entirely possible. But I can tell you, they have definitely degraded Hamas in a huge way. Same with Hezbollah, who is mainly in the Bekaa Valley now of Lebanon. They have been devastated. The degree to which they may reconstitute may be greater. I can tell you the links between them and Iran have been degraded significantly. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen internally to Iran, I don't know. I think one of the things that could bode well is that there are a lot of Iranians, maybe more than half. These are numbers I'm going back to even 10 or 12 years ago, that are tired of a Shia theocracy as their government. They're tired of the mullahs. They want to be like the West. Those kids that are in Iran want to be like the West.
No, I heard that.
And they tried to rise up. I don't know, how many years ago was it? 4 or 5 years, 6 years? No. I can't remember.
It was during Obama's time, and he didn't support. If we would have supported them more, they probably could have overthrown the Ayatollah.
Yeah, I have, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to go too much into that. I was okay with Obama, but I really wasn't okay with foreign policy the second term. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. Was not okay with that foreign policy.
I don't want to take you into politics. You're
okay. You're I'm trying to stay out of it. But
you're a true soldier. I'll tell you that.
I'm trying to do my best with it. But so I think, there's a long way to go with Iran. No question about it. We don't know the full story, the degree to which their nuclear capability has been degraded. We can't be sure of that yet. But they took a couple big black eyes there. So we'll see what future holds. I don't know what's going on eternally, so that would be a big question as well. Mm-hmm. I still think Russia remains a huge threat, a huge existential threat. For my 2 cents, mm-hmm. One political candidate, I'm not going to say who, a few years ago said Russia was the number one threat. And I think he was right.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm talking about, right? It's from my state where I'm right now, but he's retired recently. Anyway, so
I agree with you, Colonel Rick, about the ideology. When I was in Vietnam, I asked the people in the fields, rice paddies. I asked them, what would you rather be? Would you rather be free in a democracy like what we're trying to give you? Or would you prefer communism like the North is trying to give you? And they said, we don't care. It doesn't matter. As long as we can plant our rice, we don't care. So I learned at a young age that ideology is very hard to get rid of. You're not going to do it in the Middle East either. They have their own religion. They actually are pushing it in France and Germany, and they're
right.
They're taking,
yes.
Muslims are taking over in a lot of different places, because their ideology is they're the only religion and the only people, and that's it. Everybody else has to go. So we're having that problem. And how are we going to have peace and try to get an ideology? Look what happened in Vietnam. We kind of just lost all that. And in Afghanistan, we lost that too. Iraq, I know it's going to go back to being the same old. You were right when you said ideology. That's the key, but we can't change that.
You're 100% right.
And we can't change
right. We can only live with it. It's at some level. Defend against it if it's encroaching our way of life. Always defend against it if it's doing that. But yeah, that's a really tough call. One thing I will say, though, you mentioned the Middle East, that I think is somewhat of a positive note, is that from my humble observations, this, first of all, this is not 1967, where everybody that's not everybody, but vast majority of Arab states want to take out Israel.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true today. We've made a lot of mileage with Egypt, with the peace accords there. The Jordanians are very moderate, clear thinking. Yes, they're Muslim, but they are so that they almost think more in Western ways, if you will. There are the Saudis seem like they want to go in a more sort of a cooperative way. So
Yeah, the
I
Abraham
think
Accord.
Iran is, to be frank, I think Iran, of course, Iran is Shia mainly, and everybody else that I mentioned was Sunni. Iran has backed themselves into a little bit of a corner. They could still be a heck of a problem, no doubt about it, but they don't have a lot of neighbors in that part of the world. They really don't. So that
I
that
hope
could bode well.
I hope they give the people what they want, their freedoms, and then
Yes,
I guess if they were a democracy back in '79 until they were the Ayatollah, and then you had the embassy thing,
I
and
remember, speaking of '79, real quickly, when I was in Ranger School, and one of the instructors came in and said, "Boys, you might be rucking up for
mm,
Iran here in the near term." So yeah, no, I remember that well. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay. But my brother was in Iran, and he had friends there, and they were it was a decent, good country, and they treated us well. We treated them well. And then what happened? The Ayatollah came back. I guess he was in France. He come back, and he turned things all the way around again. He just established,
Instantly
yeah.
turned it in from whatever sort of non-religious model of a government it was to a theocracy. Basically where religion and the Shia form of Islam held sway at the end of the day. So
Well, let's get you away from politics here. From the Pentagon to the publisher, how he turned real world danger into best selling fiction. Could you tell us the secret of your book, Colonel Rick, about, I guess, Jake? I guess we're talking about Jake here, right?
yeah, um, I'm not sure the context of your question in terms of a secret. Uh, Jake is who he is. What you see is what you get. He's a guy that wants the best for his country at the end of the day, and he will do what he's got to do when he's called upon to do it. And that's what his future service is going to be about. Um, yeah, that's all I can say about that. No
Does
secrets.
Yeah, does the book relate to current events today and how it fits in, Rick?
Well, yeah, I mean, all three of the books, four, now that with the fourth one being Vital Mission, do in every sense of the word relate to modern day national security threats. Okay. The one maybe slight exception is that in the third book, it's more about Jake and his wife Sarah, who's a carabinieri officer, an Italian carabinieri officer. His wife Sarah, who've got to deal with uh, the mafia, the local mafia, and the confluence.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't understand this. The confluence of organized crime with terrorism. They're bedfellows to a degree sometimes. And I don't want to talk a lot about that, but there is some of that going on. And so it's a story that kind of weaves the terrorist threat in Italy to U.S. service members and Italians, uh, between the confluences between uh, the mafia, the Andrangheta, especially, and down in the southern part of the peninsula, and the Iranians and the Russians.
Yeah. Now, is Turkey going to stay with us, Rick? Are they are they getting shaky?
That's a little bit out of the blue, my friend, but that is a great question. They are not exactly. I'm just going to say it. I've been out of this business for 6 years, almost 5 years. Um, they haven't been the most reliable ally in that part of the world, but we need Turkey on board
Yeah, and they,
with NATO. They have the biggest infantry in NATO and all the other stuff. But how Turkey goes, I think the big question is if the Turks remain relatively moderate, and NATO oriented in the true sense of the word. then we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. But I don't know. All the returns haven't come in on that question. That was a heck of a question. I didn't expect that one.
I
But
just, yeah, because they beat up a couple of our sailors. Or I guess they were drunk and they were on. I shouldn't say that about our sailors, but they were partying, and I guess some Turkish guys beat them up, and that was an incident, international incident, I guess you could say. And also, there's another international incident where an Israeli, American Israeli, was beaten up by, I guess, Israel's, and Ambassador Huckabee is talking about that there should be some kind of closure to that because they killed this guy,
that's
this
terrible.
American Israel person, and so they're working on that. But that's just little things, fragile things. But the Abraham Accord, I think, is working with Bahrain and the EU and all of them. So yeah, let's get to this last question. And why are so many national security threats? You was talking about it, you alluding to that, never made to the news or was ever made public to the American people? Why are a lot of these security threats never? I guess because we don't want to scare people, right, Rick?
Well, that's part of it. I think that's part of it. You don't want to create hysteria, conspiracy, blah blah blah, all that craziness that gets out there at the end of the day. And again, in some cases, if it comes to an overall, it's at the point where it needs to be brought to the American people, then it's going to be brought to them. It will be, and lots of times you'll hear about us taking care of business with terrorists in our own country, which
Mm, yes.
God willing will continue to do. Um, then those are discussed after the fact, but every time, we have to be careful in terms of how we acquired the information. When did we know it? How did we get all that kind of stuff? Because you don't want your enemy to know how we do our business, and how we get our sources and how we do all the rest of that. So some of it, and some of these threats, Dave, are emerging, and we kind of nip them in the bud early.
Hmm.
And I guess one example would be I'm having a brain cramp now about who we took down in the caliphate that we took down in the Middle East.
I think it was that turkey question I threw out there.
Yeah, yeah, you got me good on that one. But yeah, sometimes, man, yeah, it's just not coming to me right now. It's on the Sunni side of the business where they were trying to establish their own caliphate in parts of Syria and so forth. And we took care of business. We took care of business really bad because you can imagine if a caliphate, which is basically again a theocratical type run government and area where people are very very suppressed. Um, Afghanistan, unfortunately, has turned back to a lot of this now with the suppression of women and everything else. If it spreads, if it spreads like a virus, then you got a big problem. But there was one we definitely contained, and that's all I can say about that.
Well, there's a lot of, I guess, immigrants in France and Germany and even Sweden, and even here in the U.S. They want to invoke Sharia law and they want to change our countries. You don't go to a neighbor country as a guest and change them. I wouldn't come to your house and change your rules and your ways of your house. I wouldn't do that. That's just the way we're supposed to be, you
And
know.
to be frank, Dave, Sharia law is completely incompatible, incompatible with Western laws,
Mhm.
democratic values, and our way of living. To be honest, justice, the whole ideas of justice and all that are completely different. When I was in Afghanistan, they stoned a woman, and it's just terrible. You
Yeah.
dig them in, you dig a hole up to their neckline, and you put a cloth over them, and a bunch of elders stand back and throw rocks until it's over. And
It's
this
yeah,
is Sharia law,
yeah.
and
Cut off
so
arms and everything else, and
yeah, just anyway, it's just absolutely not compatible with who we are and who we want to be as Americans and freedom loving people on the planet, including places around the globe. I'm not just talking about the United States, many places in the world. So it's just not compatible,
I'm
and
all
it's
for the Muslims practicing their religion. I mean, they have the freedom of
yeah,
right to do that. but they can't go and they can have their churches or their synagogues or
The
temples,
mosques.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they can mosque. Yeah, then they can go there and do what they want to do. Just be peaceful and be with us. Join us. Don't
Right.
don't be segmenting yourself against us.
Yeah.
Join us.
And there are some places in the world that are doing a pretty good job of it. I think one of the reasons why the Balkans is it's always a powder keg. It could go any time in the Balkans because you never know what's brewing below the surface. But in places like Bosnia, especially, I think one of the reasons for their success there is the three major faith-based groups. You know, Jewry, Christianity, and Islam have managed to live together, work together, and that was one of the things that blew it up in the first place because they didn't. But it's gotten at least a more accommodating place.
Let's get to this last question, like as closing. Your books, the four of them, especially this new one now, with Jake, the hero and the guy that has this high moral code with a very good military standing. What do you want these books to mean to people? What are you expressing to people?
Ah, great question. I think I want people to learn. You and I have talked around this a lot. Apparently, certainly in terms of what's revealed and what's not, is the degree to which there's a lot of security cooperation that takes place within our own U.S. government, interagency wise, between the military, with law enforcement, between uh, diplomats and intelligence for sure, and the degree to which we cooperate with our allies. So I talk a lot about that, certainly allied cooperation in that realm. And one of the themes early on for me, Dave, is I talk about people like you. I talk about our non commissioned officers, our sergeants who are extraordinary and who I think in the U.S. Army are the best in the world. U.S. Armed Forces are the best in the world. And I have a couple characters I've developed along those lines at the end of the day. I want people to understand that and learn about it. And I want people to understand the sacrifices that military families go through. I have that especially in my first, but it's also in the second book for sure. And what it's like to, have a family member deployed, what it's like to be told, get a knock on your door, that you just lost your husband and you kids lost their father.
Mhm.
I want them to understand how visceral that is, and then also sort of on the lighter side, if you will. I want to expose people to local cultures that I'm familiar with: Germany, France, Italy, especially France and Italy the last few years. So yeah, and what I've learned there, and make that aspect kind of a fun. And my objective here, Dave, is to first of all entertain. I want to entertain. I want to hopefully enlighten as well to the degree I can get to that point. And I want to actually educate before enlighten, educate and then enlighten in some cases. And so about things that the ways of the world. And I want them to have fun reading it. I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. There's some romantic things that go on. I try to keep it as real as I possibly can. And I want people to be able to relate to Jake and to Sarah and the characters that dedicate their at least parts of their lives like you did in the service of something higher and to their people, their fellow Americans, their fellow Italians, whatever the case might be.
I felt exactly what you're writing about. When I left for Vietnam, my dad was in World War II. He was at the Battle of the Bulge and stuff, and
Wow.
I saw him cry when he lost his mother back in the late 50s. And then the second time I saw him cry is when he hugged me when I left for Vietnam because of war. He knows what war was all about. So we do have that attachment. It doesn't matter if you're a father, an uncle, or
100%.
another friend or buddy. I had buddies also the same way. You go off to war. They worry about you, and it takes a toll on everybody's psyche.
Yeah, totally. And it does it. Some people are changed forever. It's it's a tough thing. And, we have a lot more unseen scars out there than we probably do seen scars
Mhm.
from war, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's pretty apparent when you see a very, very brave amputee or a wheelchair bound person out there really struggling with way more than you and I could ever, ever, ever understand in that realm. But then what we don't see is what's on the inside, what's going on, and those kind of conflicts that some of them maybe still be fighting. And so, we have to be respectful, we have to be supportive, and we have to, I think, understand the price that it takes to defend all of our freedoms and the great price that we're going to have every time we make the call to send some of our beautiful men and women into harm's way
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
I'm just wondering how long we can keep from putting boots on the ground in foreign countries if we can stop doing that. That's the thing. Uh, okay, this is about the end of it. I guess I had a nice chat. This is different than what I usually do. I enlighten people about disclosure and UFOs and things, and
Sure.
enlightening people on the military side of it. And I'm all for you. I'm a fellow veteran with you, and I want you to explain to people or tell people where they can get your books and where they can find information on you.
Th-
Rick.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So my website, author website is Rick Rick Steinke STEINKE.com, ricksteinke.com. And then my books can be found on obviously Amazon because it's I think more than 80. I know more than 80% of the books are sold online. And then also Barnes and Noble, certainly online, and some of those places like that are out there. But yeah, Ingram Spark is a big seller to libraries and such, so my books can be found there as well if anybody's in that business. But yeah, that's probably the best place to start looking. Just Jake Fortina, Fortina, is Jake's last name, and he's thankfully the ratings have been pretty okay till now. Let's just leave it at that. So
Great. You come with a background and very believable, very credible, and I appreciate that. And it's an honor talking to you, Colonel.
it's my honor to be interviewed and speak to a Vietnam veteran, sir, and a non-commissioned officer. And I thank you for your service for sure. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed our conversation.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah, and yeah, I don't like getting into politics myself. It's something that I know that the military tries to draw a line, and they've been doing that. Even the chiefs of staff, they try not to get involved. There's been one or two of them involved, but I think they crossed the line. But I'm with you. The honor with the military stays with the military, and they don't pour over into the executive or the judicial or the congressional branches. And so,
You got it.
yeah, and they're there to serve the country, and that's the job of the military. And I appreciate your service. And
Thank you, sir.
I have to thank you so much for doing the show, and thank Alba for the public relations work and putting us together. And those were some of the talking points we got to. So I appreciate it. Ralph R. Rick Steinke and Colonel, U.S. Army, thank you so much for being on the show. You've been listening to Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality Show, and it's not strange reality; it's just my show. I cover other topics, and this topic is not strange; it's real. Thank you, Colonel Rick, and
Thank you, sir.
good night.